Hi, my name is Ruby Yulu Ye. In Chinese is Ye Yulu. I was born in Taiwan and my family moved to Brisbane when I was 11 years old. My grandpa, he was really poor. He didn't have anything on him except a gold ring, and he built up basically our whole family with my grandmother from collecting recycled materials and selling them and then making the capitals to start a small business in Taiwan. We had a lot of artwork and paintings, calligraphies, sculptures, definitely ceramics like porcelains from Jingdezhen, and especially teaware, like we have a lot of teapots. The first time I encountered ceramics was we had that sculpture class in grade 9. Then it's not until probably when I was 30, Massive in Newstead actually just opened up. They were running beginner classes and I've always kind of liked to attend random workshops. When I went to try out the courses, really liked it, but I didn't think much of it. I'm like, oh, this feels really good. And the teacher told me I was quite good at working with clay. I seemed to get to understand the personality of the clay quite quickly. And then I just kind of go back when I have time to attend different lessons like wheel throwing or like the hand building courses, and I start reading more books and reading online, getting more in touch with what's happening in the ceramic world, learning about science behind art and combining the both, which is really great for me because my background is actually environmental science and I've always been really passionate about environmental issues. I actually was doing a PhD in the University of Queensland. COVID happened, I couldn't go into the lab, and I bought a kiln so I can experiment more. My little studio kind of expanded from a little corner in the house to taking over the whole downstairs, as you can see. Just kind of snowballed from there. I just started applying for art prizes. I got invited back to Mass and Make to do casual classes, and I really enjoy teaching. I feel like everything kind of comes together with my science background, with my teaching background, and then with my passion for art. Since I was a kid, finally can actually work with art in my 30s. So I fell in love with clay because clay is such a material that's so abundant in our earth, and I feel like clay has so many applications, from sculpture artists to industrial, tiles, bricks, in architectural use, aesthetics, and there's just so many different things you can learn. And then I think learning is such a big part that kept me going, even though it's such a humble material. I wanted to work with it sincerely. I often say clay actually kind of saved my life. I suffer a lot of depression, anxieties actually, and I think I was in a really bad mental state. Because I can work with clay, I feel like I have something new to look forward to. I can use my hands, I can meditate through clay. When you're creating something, when you're just wheel throwing, when you're just hand building, it takes your mind into a more calmer state, like you can focus and get into a flow. It's funny because I'm not sure if I found clay earlier in my early 20s, it wouldn't be different to how I feel now, because I wouldn't have the experience. All your lived experience is not wasted because everybody is different, and maybe for some people they were thinking like, well, you were doing PhD and then you were a failure, you gave up. And I do kind of internalize that sometimes. But then I was thinking there were so many opportunities that came up that you can only pursue at that moment. And if you lose that moment, I feel like you cannot get it back and you'll regret for the rest of your life. So doing it full-time was a decision I made when I quit my full-time teaching mid-2022. I signed up for a residency in Korea. I wasn't getting what I wanted to learn in Australia. Going back to Asia, kind of the roots where ceramic was been going for thousands of years, was what I wanted to kind of understand. I guess you always have to sacrifice certain aspects. So I've sacrificed my finance, like stable income. I've saved up from my working, and I know I could give it a go for at least a year or 2 years to see where it takes me. I'm glad I gave it a go because I made a lot more new connections. I went overseas. I'm really grateful because everybody I meet give me inspirations, like with their passion for clay as well. And we all go in different directions. We all have different pursuit and different life stories, but clay really brings us together. My process with my ceramic at the moment is a lot of work. I haven't really bought a fresh pack of clay because I just find them very artificial in a way, but what I do is actually collecting people's unwanted clay, and I have no idea. I've got a million buckets and bags out in the patios, and they're in different stages. I spend a lot of time reclaiming them and then wedging them and then making them into usable clay, and I find that process really meditative, like really slow going, than just, you know, buying a bag of clay straight away you can use it. Sometimes I make pots with them and then they have what we call it maybe defect in ceramics. But I do kind of embrace it because I feel like that's part of the process. Like if they're not really for functional drinking, eating out of, having those defects like bubblings or blisters on them, it's like reflecting we can't be perfect all the time. Reclaimed clay, the difficulty is to make it into like a workable condition. So from the very state they're in, if they've dried up a lot, you put water, you let it slake, and then after you slake them, you mix them really well. I usually put them on a plaster bed for them to dry overnight. You don't want to leave for too long because then it becomes rock hard again. You let it soak up to the right consistency and then you wedge them back. Then I run it through the puck mill about 3 times. Then I have to decide whether I test them, fire them in the kiln to see what they turn out. But because I'm very spontaneous in a way, when I work, I just go for it, and then if it comes out, interact with the glaze differently, I really kind of enjoy that. I don't strive so much for consistency because I don't work with restaurant wares as much. But like, for example, if I'm working with cafe orders, I would probably wanted to have the clay to be really consistent. Fresh bag of clay is probably the best option, unless I could process a whole batch of recycled clay, mix all the different clays that's already in there really well, really consistent, prepare enough of that to work on this order so they all look the same. So that's the difficulties of it. Just takes a lot of time than just go and buy 5 bags of the same clay. I've got a mystery glaze bucket as well with all the random glazes I kind of collected, mix it all together, and then I use that as part of my glaze as well. What I wanted to achieve with ceramic, I guess with my own practice, is work out a process that I feel at peace with, thinking about the environmental impacts. At the moment, investigating waste materials to replace some of the bought mined materials, or like even don't use glazes. And my idea in the future is to single fire, so reduce the firing using waste materials to create coating of glazes. In the ideal world, I wanted to purchase an acreage and able to build a studio there, able to invite people over to fire and work with me, and like off-grid solar panel with the house, rainwater tanks, able to have my own parcel of forest that naturally falls over, and I can replant trees, and collecting waste shavings, wood to use as a fuel and do single firing. But it's still a long way to go because everything takes time and money to get there. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna stumble. Nothing ever goes in a straight line. I'm sure it'll be a lot of weave and turns until I get to where I want it to be. So I'm not there yet, but I'm trying to. You have might notice with a lot of potters, we have our ceramic stamp. I got a friend who does 3D printing, just printed just the character of the radical. In Chinese surnames, we all have radicals that represents kind of a grouping of the characters, and my surname is Yeh. Yeh means leaf. And I kind of picked it because instead of just putting my surname, which is overwhelming in a lot of strokes, I feel like this represents a whole group of things I love, like going for bushwalks, going to look at plants, everything that's kind of nature related to my surname. I get my inspirations mainly from thinking and reflecting on issues I see in life. For example, like what I'm going through, thinking about parenthood, motherhood, looking at my friends struggling, trying to have a career, but also being a mother, and then body images. Another thing is I think about my upbringing as in the Eastern, like my first 11 years of life was in Taiwan, but then having most of my education all in Western ways, sometimes that does create a kind of a conflict inside. I kind of use ceramic to heal, to process those feelings inside and how I feel about looking at other people's life and struggles and their stories, and that's probably where I get inspiration from. So at the moment, I mainly sell through Mountain River Patisserie because they use all my cups and plates. There's also Kazuyo's collection in West End. Kazuyo-san is actually the first one to convince me to sell. Like, it's like my art mom. She's like always giving me a talk like, you know, your work is good, you should sell it. Oh, that's too cheap, put it up. Just like encouragements and compliments. So I think she's probably one of the person I think, yeah, really encouraged me to pursue ceramics as well. I think the challenges of creating for cafes is that they need a particular volume. One thing to be consistent with your functional wear is you have to measure the amount of clay you're throwing to start with. So you weigh the ball, you throw them, dry them out completely before you bisque fire, and then from wet clay to finish work, clay shrinks 15%. That comes down back to why using consistent clay is important, because the shrinkage is the same if you use the same clay. If I'm using all reclaimed clay, not only that it will shrink slightly different, so maybe I'll make them exactly the same, but instead of 5 ounce, it will be like 6 ounce. So that means like there are cups that don't quite make it to the volume, so I will make double the amounts to counteract, while I can still just leave the rest in the shelf to sell. Applying glazes, I probably are more free. I like to use my hands, and every cups in Mountain River is different because I don't just dip them in one glaze and then everything looks the same. The clay variations plus the glaze and how I probably touch the glazes, I use my fingers, run through it like a brush, and to create different textures and variations and layers display into why they all look different. I'm glad it worked out for her as well, because everybody who goes to a cafe seems to think the cups and ceramics marry her cafe really well. And when you can find someone who you can understand, like your style and your aesthetics happen to match, I think is pretty great blessing. Because life is hard. As a small artist, it helps, like promoting virtual collaborations. And also, if it's local, you're more connected to the place. Someone made this, lives down the street. It's someone you can approach. It's not like some big corporations churning out in factory, selling it for $1. You can build relationships. And I do feel like handmade ceramic does feel different because it does have the personality of the maker. And another thing is about, like slow fashion and fast fashions. And handmade ceramic is more like a slow fashion because you spend the money and the energy to acquire this work and then invest it in the relationship, understanding this artist. You actually appreciate your work more. It actually stays in your cupboard, look after longer than just a $1 Kmart mug. It just brings you joy to have a connection with the inanimated object that kind of have a life of its own. Even passing that down to someone is very special, I guess. It's less wasteful, even though you spend more money, but actually you spend less money buying other crap and have more enjoyment out of the same thing. For my personal experience is that if the opportunity comes up and you feel like if you don't take it now, you can never get the same opportunity, then just go for it. You still have to be reasonable and have income and that money that you can spend. But then if you feel like I've got enough money for me to take a risk, I'll say just do it. I'm a pretty responsible person and I'll probably overthink a lot more things. But even then I took a risk. So if I can do it, you can probably do it too.